Now, British military veterans who were affected by a long-running toxic water scandal in the United States say they feel let down by the lack of support from the Ministry of Defence.
Hundreds of British personnel and civilians who spent time at the Camp Lejeune base in North Carolina were exposed to cancer-causing chemicals from a polluted water supply, as John Maguire explains.
The value of this land to the Marine Corps has grown over the years as men and women have trained to fight wars in the Pacific Islands, Korea, Vietnam, Kuwait, Afghanistan, and Iraq.
The land at Camp Lejeune may have been valuable to train US Marines to fight a known enemy, but there was also a hidden threat there, drinking water that was contaminated.
Implicit warning that the United States defenses are never down is given in Marine Corps maneuvers at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina.
From the 1950s to the 1980s, it's estimated that around 1 million service personnel, civilians and their families were posted there, and more than 1,000 were British. The water at the base in North Carolina was found to contain pollutants linked to an increase in Parkinson's disease and some cancers. Richard York, a former soldier in the Royal Anglian Regiment, was posted there in 1985 and 4 years ago was told he had cancer.
They kept on asking me how much had I smoked and when did I stop smoking and how long I've been smoking for. Well, I've never, ever smoked in my life, which it didn't at the time because I didn't know about Camp Lejeune at this time. That came later. We came out shaking our heads and didn't know what could have caused it, or what it could have been.
Crews embark with.
For years, victims in the US have been fighting a major legal action seeking compensation. But Richard believes many this side of the Atlantic will never have heard about the case.
I think it's absolutely disgusting. The fact that as we know, a lot of British soldiers and even more Royal Marines have served there during that time period. And I'm almost certain there are people who have either passed away or suffered severe injuries, and cancer from being there who actually don't know, or their families don't know about it.
Richard says he's never received any official contact about the scandal, and the Ministry of Defence says it takes the safety of its personnel very seriously. 2 years ago, President Biden announced a scheme to help veterans and families affected by toxicity while working with US forces, which extends to people from around the world.
This is the most significant law our nation has ever passed to help millions of veterans who are exposed to toxic substances during their military services.
But the window is closing. Applications must be submitted by August the 10th. Those who served, many putting themselves in harm's way, but who were struck down by an invisible enemy, now face a race against time for justice, for recognition, and for compensation. John Maguire, BBC News.
We are joined now here on the sofa by Chris Lear, whose husband Jonathan was diagnosed in 2002 with kidney cancer. He died 7 years later. Joe House, whose wife Carol passed away in 2021 from a rare form of leukemia, and military lawyer Andrew Buckham. Thank you all very much indeed for talking to us this morning. Chris, this is something that not many people will know about. Tell us a little bit about your history and how you and your husband came to be in this, the circumstances of your life that took you to this place.
Well, my husband Jonathan, we was posted to Camp Lejeune in 1980, and we were there for 2 years and left in 1982. We had a good 2 years there. Obviously, none of this was known to us. I travelled out there with a 6-month-old baby and a 22-month-old toddler. And so, this is quite a worry the fact that we were living with such high toxicity in the water.
And Joe, you have been brought together. You've got to know each other in these most awful of circumstances, haven't you? Tell us about your wife, about Carol.
Right, well, we took over from the Lears in June 1982. 2 years out there, very different environment to the UK. And, you know, as far as we knew, there was no problem until Carol was diagnosed in April 2021 after a pre-op for a hip replacement. So then there was 4 months in hospital. It was an agreement, you know, the treatment wasn't working. So she came home. We had a fairly normal existence for a while until, as happens with these things, when you can't fight infection, that kicked in end of November, and she died at home in 13th of December 2021.
And Andrew, talk to us about how this connection has been made, and to be able to trace what's happened to these two families back to that camp.
So there is information out there, particularly in the US, because it's a US-based compensation system. Very sadly, we haven't seen a huge amount of engagement by the MOD in terms of getting the messaging and the communication out there to the UK veterans community. So in some respects with Joe and Chris, it's almost been luck. We've been trying to push out on social media platforms and through websites and newsletters with the veterans community to try and get the information and this key date of the 10th of August. But it's been difficult. And obviously now time is ticking, and we want to try and get as much as we can in terms of engagement with veterans so they have an opportunity to consider the information and make an informed decision as to whether they want to apply for compensation.
So what have you learned?
I learned about this only 13 weeks ago. And obviously it came out in August 2022. I had a call from a journalist from Edinburgh who found me in Woodbury and found my email in a local magazine, and he emailed me to see if he could have a chat with me. So it was an absolute bombshell on the 5th of May to be told this. And I feel that this is not the way that I should have been informed of such a catastrophe that's affected the family so greatly. But I have to thank him for finding me and giving me the news, and I have to thank Erwin Mitchell for everything they've done to get me as far as I've got in 13 weeks. Whereas if we had been told originally by the MOD, we'd have had 2 years to sort of get the claim in. So.
And Joe, make that connection when you were first made aware that it was, given the time you were out there, that there was the contamination with the water, and that, you know, later then discovering that the US military had been very clear about offering compensation that just wasn't available here.
Well, my story's slightly different because I happened to see a newsletter in February, March 2023, just through luck, a Royal Marines Association newsletter that had said if you'd served at Camp Lejeune during this time, contact Erwin Mitchell. And I agree with what Chris has said. The support then, when I contacted Erwin Mitchell, has been very good indeed, as it has been from subsequently the BBC. So I also contacted what I thought would be the appropriate authorities in the ODU to give support. And, well, put it bluntly, we've received no support. So then, with Erwin Mitchell, we did the podcast, which went out in February on World Cancer Day, I think. And from that, we got some traction, and Chris was found. Others I'm not sure about. I don't know, you know, what numbers have been found. And here we are now.
Andrew, how many more people might there be with these stories?
Well, we don't expect the numbers to be as high as they are in the US. I think there's over 150,000 veterans now registered in the US. And we're probably talking about hundreds. I sit here as a veteran as well. And to try and get that message out there, as I've said, is really important. So not only today through yourselves, but over the next few days leading up to the 10th of August, we'd ask the veterans community to be engaged, those organisations that support veterans through newsletters or through social media platforms, to get that information out there. We've got a landing page on our website that's dedicated to the Camp Lejeune compensation. So there is information there, but people need to be proactive, sadly, and that includes those members of the veteran community getting that message out there. And
Chris and Joe, it's brought you two back together for the first time in a very long time, hasn't it? How long?
40 years.
Wow. And today's the first time you've met?
Well, yesterday.
We have, once I got to know Joe was also affected, I said to him, who are you talking to? And he said, nobody. He felt very isolated, as I've felt very isolated. Yeah. But we have talked frequently, haven't we, on telephone, which has helped. Because I will say that the day I got the news, it took me back 15 years when I lost my husband. And it was like losing him all over again. So, we do need that sort of support from the right people.
Well, thank you for talking to us about it this morning. I know it's still difficult, but thank you for coming in. Really good to have you both here. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.